Chimera Games proudly presents No Directions PaizoCon 2013 coverage.
Video Special Number 1, Gamer Girls, Unite and Write, featuring Christina Stiles, Amber Scott, and Amanda Hamon. We join this seminar already in progress.
We're very appreciative as women of what you guys are doing at Paizo to bring us to the forefront and absolutely give us some shine time. Yes.
On that front about noticing how things have changed in the world toward the attitude towards women, have you noticed anything in the art that's changed? Because I mean, there were women depicted.
Depicted is a great word. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that.
Yeah,
I'll try
go ahead with your thoughts.
When Christina first asked me to be on this panel, I was like, sure, I don't know what I'll talk about for 20 minutes or whatever, but I'll think of something. And now I'm like, I have so much to say. In my experience as a writer, writers don't always get a lot of input into the art orders. Occasionally, there will be a particular project that comes up where you do get some input. And I made this awesome slideshow of some of my favorite art, and then I couldn't get it to download. There was no projector, and so it was very sad. But one of the first art orders I ever did was for the first book I ever wrote, which was Secrets of Zendrick for Wizards of the Coast. And I got to do an art order for a rival adventuring group. They weren't like an evil group. They were just other adventurers trying to get the same things that you were. And so I wrote the female depicted in the scene as my character in the Severon game I was playing, actually with Jason Bowman and Wes Schneider. And she was a shifter, she was full-figured, she had darker skin, she was, kind of tough-looking, and she just had this leather, vest armor and pants and boots, and just looked really tough and awesome. And when the art came out, I was just in love. I was like, this is my character, in art. And she was not a typical, what you'd see in fantasy art. And then the other thing I thought of was, on the Paizo message boards, there were often discussions of the kind of art that had been on the Dragon magazines and Dungeon magazines back in the day. And my avatar there was still the Medusa from one of the Dragon covers, who's kind of lounging on a recliner, and there's a guy reaching for her, and he's been turned to stone. I just thought that was amazing. And then a lot of people really didn't like it and said it was overly sexualized. And I happened to think it was really attractive. But the more I thought about it, I thought, well, I think the reason that it's a little difficult to appreciate this piece of art is because it's very similar to all the pieces of art. All the women are in the same sort of position, and all the women had that same sort of revealing, attire and attitude. And it's easier to appreciate that, I think, if you have a lot of variety. And that made me think of a dungeon cover that had a samurai on it. I think it was 131 or 140. And the samurai was kind of leaping on this yeti. And I was like, I seem to remember there was a discussion about how the samurai was actually a woman, but you can tell because she didn't have boob plate. And then James Jacobs mentioned it on the boards that that was actually a woman samurai, and people were like, well, if you can't even tell, why say she's a woman? What does it matter? And which was sort of very zen. And so anyway, I did a message board search to see if I was remembering this issue correctly, and I found this thread, and it was actually started by me, and I was like, oh, no wonder I remember that. And yeah, it was just interesting to see that even as far back as, that was probably 2005, 2006, there was already this move towards the diversity of representations of women in art. To the point where we were discussing, is it necessary to mention if it's a woman, if it's an androgynous character? Can we leave that to people's imaginations? And the fact that I do think that women are beautiful and that some women are sexual. The problem is when all the women are extremely beautiful and extremely sexual, there's no way to differentiate between the different kinds of representations, and so I think variety is really important.
True.
I don't know if that answers the question, but I just
Yes.
Well, I think with non-human characters, noticing that, the gender balance of the depictions of the different non-human races seems to be skewed somewhat. I don't remember any female half-orcs from Old Third Ed, although of course we've got a few in Pathfinder, and I still don't think there's any big-name female dwarves, that kind of thing. So sort of wondering since if, various artists' aesthetic preferences tend to work their way into there, which isn't inherently illegitimate, but sort of gives you a skewed view of the different cultures. If in theory you've got female dwarves going out and adventuring and stuff, but they never really show up in the artwork because nobody likes drawing short, hairy women.
That may be the case, but it could also be the art briefs that were sent over. Nobody requested any, so you know it goes back to that not thinking about those particular things. Yeah, hard to say.
Yeah, I think you do though. And to answer your question, I think that there is maybe a little bit of a tendency for various editors, artists, whatever, to not want to depict women that aren't in that style, in that sexualized style. And you know, like you said, it is important, just as it is with male characters, to show the diversity of, okay, here's an attractive character, here's, you know, kind of a surly character, here's a character who, you know, clearly isn't interested in that and just wants to wreck your face. But yeah, I think that there could be a little bit more of a sort of open-minded thinking of, let's depict a character who's not interested in what men think of her, and I would like to see a lot more of that. I would like to see more female dwarves. I'd really like to see more female dwarven characters in general, just in adventures and in fiction. I can honestly think of one female dwarven character who's in fiction, and it's in a Forgotten Realms line, and she's like a really minor cleric. You know, so,
in
yeah.
Robin Law's Blood in the City.
Yeah. Yay! That's awesome.
Yeah, in the Pathfinder novel, Blood in the City.
Oh yes, I hadn't thought about that one. Yeah, so I mean they are out there, but they're pretty few and far between. Yeah, so it would really be nice to see a little bit more of that, and I think that would also help open up people's minds to not say that my female character has to have cleavage or my female character has to look a certain
way. And in the next month, the first adventure path comes out, the Whirlwind Incursion, which I wrote. And
yes!
Gorgeous female.
First woman AP writer!
And my producers actually add that dwarf is on the cover of her latest the Terra World guide that's over in this book.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Well, see, go check that out then.
Yeah, there's a...
you didn't mention is, that's actually one of our iconics.
Oh, awesome.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah, it has a female half-orc paladin on the cover, so that's and a really awesome-looking female half-orc.
Yeah, I've seen several
cover.
female half-orcs that are really cool.
Lewis, may I mention the project that we are?
Yeah, go ahead.
Lewis is going to be one of the first publishers to do an AP of all women writers. Two of us were actually on there. We got Miranda Horner lined up and Tracy Hurley. So.
I mean, I know for myself, this is going to sound kind of goofy. I'm black, if you did not notice. I've been involved in gaming for a long time, and I know it's very difficult to get out of, like, I'd say, the perspective of white male writer and things like that. And my biggest joke has always been, you know, I think gaming will be equal when you see a black male paladin on a unicorn, and there's nobody going, well, that's not going to happen. You know, it's just like, it's something small, but I think I know for myself, even as a publisher, when I'm thinking about designing for characters, I usually just design character and then I go, flip a coin, male, female. That's how we're going to do it, make it easy. But I know when I put the art order out, and I'm guilty of this, I admit this, I have hyper-sexualized several characters. And I've done that specifically to make them hypersexual. And that was the purpose of it.
It's effective.
Yeah, and like I said, I know men are going to look at me, but at the same time, I made characters that were very, very non-sexualized women. One of my favorite characters from the book, she has a shaved head, tattoos, covered head to toe, but my theory has always been, make sure it looks cool. As long as it looks cool, people don't care. Yeah. Sexual is one thing, but cool is definitely where you want to be.
Right. I think it's really hard to talk about gender in gaming and inclusiveness in gaming without expanding that to other areas. The more we've progressed towards having better representation of women in gaming, we also have seen different sexualities in gaming. We've seen transgender characters and characters of different skin colors and body types, and that's really, I still see, even when we see really great representation of women or different genders and different races, there's still such a strong push towards having only slender characters, and that's something that also I'd like to see change. You've had a question.
I only started playing back in April, and
welcome to the club.
Yeah. I actually dragged my boyfriend with me. He's been playing since D&D first came out, starter box edition and everything, and he's talked to me about it and everything, and I found out about Pathfinder. And he didn't want to go because he hadn't played Pathfinder, he hadn't seen it, he didn't know what it was, and so I dragged him to a game, and he's like, yay, this is where 3.5 should have gone instead of 4.0. But one of the issues is I've become very active in the gaming community, and I've only really dealt with it once, but that was someone in one of my gaming groups basically singling me out for a lot of, not necessarily abuse, but a lot of hardship because I was a female character. And because I was a female, I was the only girl in the group. And basically, he didn't want me to get any treasure, he didn't want me to get any of the loot. And I was the rogue, so I would be like opening the treasure chest and everything, and he didn't want me to have anything. And he was getting pissed off because, yeah, I'd pocket a small gem as my share and then give the rest to everybody else. Or I wanted I'm the rogue, I'm the one with acrobatics, and I wanted the ring that would give me a bonus to acrobatics, and he's like, no, we should give it to the person with the lowest acrobatics mod, not the person with the highest. Even though the rest of the group is like, she should have it. And I just wanted to know if there's been any change in, like, prejudice against women in the gaming world, and a change in how women are treated in the gaming world.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I guess I've been in this business for a while, but my con experiences, I've never come across that, though some women say they have. Earlier in my life, I had more of the creepy men who, I was 13 when I first started playing. And, me too. And there was a very creepy guy that was the game master, and I mean, he was just on the edge of being a pedophile. He may have been. And I was like, please, brother, do not leave me alone with this guy. But I haven't experienced that at the cons, but I've noticed some younger women have. Maybe it's because I'm just getting more of a loudmouth as I get older. But I don't know. I'm really an introvert, so. But the thing I always tell women, if you find a group like that, get away from them. You don't need that crap. There are many, many men and other women that you can play with. I actually, at one of the cons, played in an all-women game. It was run by a woman, had all women players except one guy. And that was very rare, but it was like, this is awesome, you know?
Yeah. So. I would say that there are always going to be people out there who do that, and they are not justified, and I think that anytime you do come across them, hopefully they're in the minority. I've heard people where the entire group has treated them that way and they just leave, and sometimes they don't even want to play gaming anymore, and that's an absolute tragedy, and I really hope that doesn't happen very often. But when that does happen, the best thing that you can really do is, well, first of all, of course, try to stand up for yourself as much as you can. I know it's hard sometimes, but to have allies around you is really important, whether it's men or women. To have them say, no, she should get the acrobatics ring, or no, she's being fair, and to just have them contradict the person every way. And sometimes they change, and sometimes they need it to be pointed out to them that you're not treating me fairly because of my gender or whatever. So that those can be awkward conversations, but you shouldn't feel like you can't say something to them or that you can't argue with them. And like I said, it can be hard, but you just have to know.
He would do it in group session because he knew that the rest of the group wouldn't agree with it. He would harass me on Facebook and argue with me on Facebook and message me on Facebook. And then when he'd get onto, I'd go to the general forum where everyone could see it because he was private messaging me. He would go off on a tangent about how I'd been berating him. And he would basically turn it around, and the group ended up getting shut down over it. Because after every single gaming session, he'd start an argument with me about how the treasure had been divided, even though he came in after it started, and he started berating me about treasure I'd gotten before he even joined the group.
You definitely need to get this person out of your life. That's very toxic.
And it's difficult too because, when people start gaming for the first time, it can be very new territory. You don't always know how games are supposed to run or how people are supposed to act. You don't really have a lot of frame of reference. So targeting may not seem like targeting at first. It can be difficult to realize when you're being harassed or when there's just, banter, or maybe it's just new players who are treated this way. Like, you don't really know. And especially if you don't have a lot of exposure to it, it can be hard to recognize and hard to decide what to do. And the main rules are, first of all, to do what you're comfortable with. That may be speaking up, and that may be just leaving quietly. No one's under any obligation to try and teach somebody else about how to be, gender conscious or something like that. the point of games is to have fun, and so the best rule I think is if you're not having fun, you should try and find another game, especially when there's so many online games like you mentioned, and so many different forums that you can go to play games online if there's nobody in your area. There's no reason to stay in a game where when it's time to play, you're like, oh, I hope that guy doesn't say that thing, or that girl doesn't say that thing.
Yeah, the best thing you can do is just get away from them, because there are some people who won't change. There are a lot of people who, you know, if you actually point it out to them that they're acting a certain way, they'll realize it and they'll feel really bad, but it sounds like maybe this guy isn't one of those people. So.
Well, I found out because I felt like it was my fault when the GM shut down the group, and he said it's not your fault. He had actually invited the guy to join the group because he hadn't been allowed in any games in the Spokane area for a year.
That's a sign right there.
He'd been blacklisted.
Is there another question in the back? Or
Yeah, I think you've...
somewhere?
I have a question back there, Mr. Yeah.
I was just curious. One thing I've noticed is that a lot of the modules seem to be written more for what males would enjoy.
Not mine.
I just like to see there are women who like to hack and slash.
There are, there are, but yeah, I tend to put a little bit of everything in mine. I was running Beyond the Ghostlight Reef yesterday, and first part of it is mostly role-playing. And how much battle you get into depends on how stupid you are. So, you know, there's an opportunity for that total party
stupid
kill.
or brave?
Brave, no, foolhardy, no.
In the latest Tropes versus Women in Video Games video by Anita Sarkeesian, she talks about the damsel in distress trope, if you haven't seen them, they're on YouTube and really good. And the repeated image in video games of the woman being kidnapped and the man having to go save her using violence. And a really important point she makes, I think, is that this sort of repeated image isn't just damaging to women, it's damaging to men too, because it only gives them the opportunity to be the violent, manly character. It doesn't give them any opportunity to explore other ways of playing these games or interacting in these fantasy worlds. And the more that men are only faced with one option, which is kind of the violent alpha male, the less able they are to explore other types of having fun and other types of interacting. And I think when traditionally male gamers are only faced with the same kind of modules over and over again, it reinforces the idea that male gamers are ones that are violent and like to play violent games where you kill people. And it becomes difficult for male gamers to say they want something different because it's become so ingrained over the years. So I think diversity in modules and the different kinds of adventures that are proposed are good for all gamers because it can attract women who may not feel comfortable jumping right into like an ultra-violent game, but it can also help change games that have predominantly male characters or male players who haven't gotten a chance to try, you know, role-playing heavy games or diplomacy type games.
Yeah, I want to bring up on you were talking about Sarkeesian.
Yeah.
I found out about this late because I'm not a video gamer, but I was at a panel at Con Carolinas, and the girl that was sitting on there with me was a big video gamer, and she started telling me the story about her. And one of the biggest things that she said, of course, was that woman started getting death threats and rape threats as soon as she put up this Kickstarter that she was doing this. And I just could not believe the amount of misogyny that was directed, you know, at this idea, you know. So I think I'm seeing more in video gaming, that online, more anonymous type of stuff where you see a lot more of this, ill treatment of women. And the girl that was playing with me, she's a real good gamer and all, and she said as soon as some people found out she was female and playing, they're like, oh no, you got to get off of here, you know.
Yeah, video games is a different world than role-playing games for the most part. There's a little overlap, but they really have different sorts of people playing, I think. But I have to admit, I have a professional Facebook page, you know, I'm very open about interacting in public forums and stuff like that. I do seminars, I give podcasts, and part of me wonders when, like, it'll be my turn, when somebody will take something the wrong way and I'll get this sort of backlash. And it's frightening, you know, but I do have a lot of friends and family who support me. I've got a lot of great writers and editors who I know would back me, and that's really important. And I think that the writing industry is very receptive to having new people. I had a friend introduce me to someone and said she was an artist. He's like, oh, so she's not a competitor. And I was like, I've never thought of other writers as competitors. We are collaborators. In every project I've ever worked on, writers have been so free with their ideas and their time and are willing to help. And it's one of the biggest strengths, I think, of the role-playing industry. So I feel that we have a little bit of a buffer against that sort of...
That's very true, because many of us... we know each other, whether it's through internet or having worked on projects together. There's just such a camaraderie. I don't feel like there's competitiveness, you know, among the people that I've dealt with anyway. There's a lot of work out there. Just, you know, you can find it at various levels, but it's out there, and that's another topic I did want to discuss if people are interested in getting in the gaming industry. If you're not, then we'll continue along these lines. But
and that actually was my question. I was going to ask what you guys found was the biggest hurdle for you to break into this industry, and do you think that that is now still probably the biggest hurdle that people would face?
Talk to our newcomer.
I honestly, the biggest hurdle to me getting involved in the gaming industry was myself. Because I've been a professional writer for a long time, since 2005. I was a newspaper reporter for a while. I now work at a Big Ten university as a writer in communications. And I've been playing RPGs, D&D, for about 11 years. And we were at Gen Con one year, and I was really unhappy with my job, and I was thinking, gosh, you know, I really need to find something new. I should find something that I really enjoy. And my husband's like, well, why don't you just, you know, ask if some of the RPG companies are interested in freelance editors or writers. And my first initial reaction was, I don't know if I can do this. And I don't know if it had to do with the fact that there aren't that many women writers, or if just, you know, it didn't have really occurred to me that, hey, you know, those modules that we play on the weekends, I could actually be involved in that. But I finally sort of worked up the nerve, and I went up to Paizo. I actually went up to several companies, but I remember specifically going up to Paizo and got directed to Wes Schneider, who a lot of you folks know is the editor-in-chief over there. And he was just so welcoming, and I asked him, you know, are you guys interested in freelance editors? And at the time, they were doing all their editing in-house, but he said, you know, what do you think about design? And I had that, again, that initial internal reaction, I don't know if I can do this, you know, it just seems like something that's so different from what I do, and it turns out that it really wasn't, and I actually could do it, and was pretty good at it. And, you know, so having that initial foot in the door and having someone who was so welcoming helped me get over those fears, but I don't know if anybody else ever had that sort of internal thought. Yeah, that's like, gosh, I don't know if I can do this, because it is a really complicated, you know, thing, and, you know, even though if you have been playing, there's a huge leap from, you know, I play every weekend to, okay, now I actually write and I edit it and that sort of thing. So I didn't really have a lot of huge barriers. It wasn't like I went up to people and they said, no, you can't do this, you can't work for us. You know, of course I got ignored by several companies, but that's
par for the course.
That's pretty much par for the course. But yeah, so I don't know if anybody else has ever struggled with that, but you can do it, you know. Yeah, go ahead. Please.
I have a story, and I've told it like every seminar I go to because it's always relevant, and this weekend I was like, I'm not going to tell that story because I've told it like so many times. But it's so relevant. So I'll tell the condensed version. I'm sorry if you've heard it before. In 2006, I think, or maybe 2007, I was at Gen Con, and I went to a seminar called Writing for Dungeon Magazine. And I'd never been published in Dungeon Magazine, only Dragon, and I really wanted to be published in Dungeon because I love writing adventures. And my friend John and I went, I think our friend Troy was there, and we sat at the middle of the room, and there was Eric Mona was there, and James Jacobs, probably some other people, and they did a query writing exercise where we all shouted out ideas, and we developed a bad guy, and we developed, you know, minions and a map and an idea. And the way it worked is you wrote a query, so like a one-page proposal for your adventure. You sent it to Dungeon, and if they liked it, they would ask you to write it or revise it, and that was like a big step, getting your query accepted. And when we finished the group writing exercise, Eric said, this is a really great query. If you guys all go home and write it up professionally, send it to me, say you were at the seminar, and I'll pick the best one, and we'll get someone to write it and put it in Dungeon Magazine. And I was like, wow, this is the best thing ever. Like, here I am wanting to write for Dungeon, and here's the editor saying, like, here's how you write for Dungeon. And then I was thinking about it as we're wrapping up, and I thought, well, you know, I already write for Dragon. I kind of know the guys pretty well. I was living in Seattle at the time, so I saw the Dragon staff pretty frequently. And I was like, maybe somebody here is like waiting for their chance, and they're not going to get it because I'm going to write this great query and like steal their thunder or something. I don't know. It was this really complicated thing in my head that totally made sense at the time, that I was not going to send in this query. I was going to let somebody else have a chance. So I was talking to the panelists afterwards that came up and said hi, and I told them my big rigmarole about why I was not going to send in this query. And I remember Eric kind of smiling and nodding as I talked, and when I finished, he said, yeah, nobody ever sends in the query. And I said, what? No, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, there's like 60 people here for an hour. We all paid for badges and took like an hour out of our day to go to a seminar called How to Write for Dungeon Magazine. And you're like, here's how to write for Dungeon. I mean, you'll be swamped with queries. It's just me that's not going to write. And he's like, no, we do this seminar all the time, and nobody ever sends it in. I don't know, they think they're not going to be creative enough, or I was kidding, or they're going to, do a bad job, or whatever the reason, nobody ever sends it in. And I was like, well, that's dumb. I mean, if nobody's going to send it in, I will. And so I went home and I said to John, are you going to send it in? He's like, I don't know, I'm pretty busy right now. So I was like, okay, well, I will then. And I wrote it, and I sent it in, and they contacted me like 6 weeks later, and they're like, yeah, you're the only one who sent it in, so you get the job. And I wrote it, and it was published. It was my only dungeon adventure ever. And that, in a nutshell, was like, I was like totally, and I was already established, and I was totally ready to talk myself out of a project. So I completely agree with Amanda. The number one thing is just like getting out there.
It's courage, but and actually putting your foot out into that market. But it's also butt in chair, which a lot of people do not get. Being a writer, being an editor takes time. We give up a lot of things to do what we do on the side. I don't have any children, so one good thing, my weekends are just constantly writing, unless my in-laws happen to come over and bother us. But that's my joy. So but I give up things going to movies or hanging out with some friends or whatever.
On the topic of getting into writing and that kind of thing, I'm Canadian, and I've found a lot of hurdles just because I'm not in the American market. I can't go to all these cons. It's not travel viable for me. I don't meet a lot of these people. And I'm just wondering, sort of, in the professional writing world, how many, for instance, women are not from the U.S. who are writing for U.S. companies?
That I don't know, but I will give you an idea of how I got in the industry, which anybody here can do. Find a company that you like, even if you might have a better chance with a smaller company, but get on the forums and make yourself known, present ideas there. If they need a proofreader, offer up your proofreading skills. If they like you, they'll start using you more. I got in through Atlas Games and Eden Studios early on when the Die-20 boom started, when it just came out really in 2000. So I started making myself invaluable to these people. I would play test things. I was a playtester for both Eden and Atlas, and they got to see that I had some skills to see problems with things and that I could help develop them. Next thing I know, I'm an editor. So that's how it gets started sometimes, is just making yourself invaluable to somebody, and they see that you can do it, and they start calling on you more and more. I want to go to Lewis and right back here too as well.
I mean, yeah, I know for myself, most people who write for me usually, because I do one kind of year, and this is probably it, and I'm down in South Florida. And I tell people, look, you want to get in touch with me, get online. I'm always online. Send me an email. I'll tell you a very quick story. 2 guys last year signed up to write with me. One guy said, hey, I'm going to do the best writer you've ever dealt with. Don't worry about it. You're going to be hiring me. I'm like, okay, no problem, great. Another guy came up to me and said, hey, challenging. Do something really challenging. All right. The guy said he could write anything. I told him what to write. I never saw anything from him. I sent him emails for
button chair, yeah.
Never got back to me. The other guy, Jeff Lee, is not my head writer for my company.
Yes.
It's like, all I need you to do is do the thing you say you're going to do. I mean, 90% of the people, just write it. Even if it's horrible, if we can work with it. That's what editors are for. I'll tell you, I'm a horrible writer. I'm not good at writing. I'm an editor who takes care of that for me, makes it look pretty. That's his job. As long as you put yourself in the chair and do the work, you're 90% above everybody else.
That is key, very much key.
And on Sunday at 11, I think, we have a seminar called Freelancing 101, which will have a lot of more specific information on how to break into writing and the kind of things you'll experience, the challenges you'll face.
And also practice pitching something in under 400 words. Open Design, Kobold Press, if you see Wolfgang Bauer around here, one of the things that he does is have projects where you can pitch on them if you're a patron. And we've had people like Brandon Hodge came out of that group, and Adam Daigle. have gone on to great careers, but they started with open design pieces. So keep those kind of opportunities in your mind as well. And by the way, this is Cobalt Press's Hatchling Award winner, by the way. Yes, we look forward to great things coming from her, and she will be totally used for the next couple of years.
I'm not waiting back
Hey,
because
Dawn.
I'm trying to watch my bag over here, but I
Yeah, go ahead, Dawn.
first disappeared. But I wanted to say that advice works. Get involved in the forum. Make yourself known. And when they need help, offer help, and because you've made yourself known, they'll give you a chance, and if you prove that you can do it. That's how I got in. I edited some of the bigger books that are for sale by Frog Out Games.
Yeah, this is Don Fisher back here.
I'm the editor for those. And Bill has opened up an opportunity for me. I'm working with a co-writer who lives in, I think she lives in Ohio.
Yeah.
Vicky Parker, she runs her own company, Tabletop.
Yeah.
So right now we're collaborating on a book that we're going to eventually have ready for Frog Out Games.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So that's how you get your foot in the door.
Yeah. You want to comment?
Yeah, I'm not here because I'm the one trying to break into the
I thought you were. Wait a minute. You the imposter. Go ahead.
But I have no shame in pushing my own product. And the reason I came was because I'm looking for writers right now.
Yeah.
People that, like Lewis said, people that are reliable and can meet deadlines. And yeah, I'm willing to work with people. So if you are interested in that, just swing by. I'll give you my card. You can email me stuff.
Right beside him.
What's that?
Brilliant.
Oh, you like?
And I'm looking for artists, by the way.
Well, I just wanted to say really quick that I'm really glad that there are both men and women at the panel and people from lots of different backgrounds and stuff.
Yes.
When I started posting about it on my Facebook page, I tried to make it sound that this was the kind of a panel where lots of people are welcome and it's not just for women. Because I think that changing the game to a point where lots of different people can feel that they are represented in the game, both men and women, that it will be stronger for everybody. And it's not something where women all get together and decide, together we are going to change everything by ourselves. It's definitely a thing, it's something that the whole community is going to benefit from. And I think that there are just as many men as women who want to see a new kind of game where everyone is represented. I forget, James Jacobs came up with this great expression because he was a guy who liked to play female characters, and he called himself like a trans character, something like that, I forget. And that's not always acceptable for men in areas. Men aren't always able to play female characters or feel safe or comfortable doing so in their games, or feel like they can play, you know, characters who are small and delicate or fast, not necessarily like big damage people, or characters who are just role players, not necessarily. And just as women may sometimes feel pressure to only play characters who are amazing. Like if my character isn't fantastic, people are going to be like, oh, well, that character sucks, she's a girl, you know? So I have to be like the best character ever. I have to know everything about the game. And it's so limiting to everyone. This should be a game where you're allowed to explore your fantasies and what you think would be awesome to do if you were like a fantasy character.
Yeah, I think fantasy in general is less an idealized world and more a world where everybody should have fun, everybody should feel welcome. It should be what we aspire the world to be, not what one small specific group aspires their world to be. So once we sort of get out of that old mindset and get more toward the more preferred mindset,
and
it'll help everybody. Like
we're going to see that more too as people start getting older and having children, and they're introducing their children into the games. Tomorrow I have a table of 5 little girls who are going to be playing Fairy's Tale, so I look forward to the next generation of gamers and game writers and helping them get there.
With regard to writing, so like you all said, just, you know, putting the words down is the most important part, but what kind of writing experience is it helpful to have to write game stuff? For instance, I did a lot of papers in college, being a history major, and I write a little fiction, but neither of that is exactly like game modules, so...
I call it writing fictional nonfiction, because they're
We're like twins.
Yeah, well, I'm one of those right left brain people because I do computer programming and stuff by day and crunch numbers. I'm an analyst basically. But I write, and I have taught freshman composition as well, and also. But if you got to look at what you're good at. Are you good at the fluff type stuff, creating background material? Or are you good at actually writing rules in Crunch? Is that what you're interested in? There's not that much fiction possibilities in gaming stuff. There's usually like a paragraph or so to introduce something, a lead-in text. But other than that, your opportunities, if you lean toward that way, are more fluff, as we call it. But it is basically setting material or NPC personalities, and you can always team up with somebody who's better at the Crunch and provide something together. There's no reason you can't collaborate. So find somebody who balances you and pitch something. If that's the case.
The best decision I ever made as a publisher was put my daughter in charge of the history. It's made for a very balanced and interesting history. Totally different. You don't always see this, but it's totally different than what I would have come up with. Totally different than what my son would have come up with. And it's what got me originally thinking. I need to find some female writers because it's definitely going to help diversify what it is I'm working on. So history or roles, either way, I'm happy to see it. But
definitely,
the more varied the writers are in a team, and the artists and the editors, the more variety you see around you, and the more different kinds of cultures and lifestyles you're exposed to, the more that is going to work into your writing. It just makes sense. It's the same. I just finished my management degree, and that was like one of my pet things. Was big businesses these days are talking about how they need to change, how companies need to be agile, they need to be pivotal, and there's all these buzzwords, but basically it means that industry is not how it used to be. Companies have to be flexible, they have to be willing to change. There's so much, companies are so much closer to their customers now than they ever used to be. And yet, so many industries continue to hire the same type of managers physically and as far as backgrounds are concerned, and expect somehow that they'll be able to adapt to a new type of business. And I think the same is true in writing. As writing changes, the composition of writing teams, art teams, editorial teams needs to change. Because how are you going to ever connect with this wide variety of customers who are right there on your message boards if you don't know what they look like, what they sound like, where they come from, what kind of accents they have, how they dress. These things all have to make it into the product in order to be able to connect with a lot of different kinds of players, in my opinion. Yeah.
Well, as I said earlier, I've only been trained for a few months, so according to my boyfriend, I picked it up really, really quickly, but how hard would it be for someone like me who has so little experience actually playing to actually break into writing?
It's butt and chair.
Yeah.
It is butt and chair. That's
my son's job.
I'm a creative writing major in college, and as soon as I got involved, like within a month or two of starting playing, I was like, hey, I can write this stuff, because I do write fantasy, and I'm actually going to start running a campaign next week that I'm writing based on a couple of novels that I'm writing.
Just one thing I do want to suggest is get a thick skin. I started trying to get published with Dungeon Magazine. I have some rejection letters from Wolfgang Bauer, let me tell you. But I currently do a lot of work for Wolfgang, so it takes time. It's a craft. So continue to work at it. And don't take no, for an answer that I'm not good. There's possibilities you are crappy, but but you can always improve. And just don't.
Fix stuff.
Yeah, there are people that will fix stuff, but editors do not like to get total crap. Let me tell you, from experience, there's only so much we can do.
Because he's looking over what I'm writing, and I'm kind of collaborating with him, because like I said,
do get people to look at it.
And so that's why I'm going to be running it, is so people can look at it and see where I'm screwing up.
Do get people
I
to look at
already
your writing.
have like the half dozen people that I've talked to about my novels and that, and the world that I'm doing, going, oh my gosh, I want to read the books when they're published.
Yeah, but
And
so you don't get into the point where you're just talking about it. You still got that button chair piece.
Yeah, they're interested in the story. I've actually already written out level 1 and level 2 already in advance. So I'm willing to put in the time. Like I said, I'm a creative writing major in college, so I'm doing a heck of a lot of writing.
That's the best thing that you can do, really, as far as breaking into the industry. I think pretty much everyone here probably wrote things for our friends and for our home games. And
stuff that we burned, we never want people to see again.
And that's really your proving ground, you know. So once you get to the point where you're feeling confident, your players are really enjoying what you're doing, you know, maybe that's the point where you say to a company or to an editor, hey, this is what I've done, this is what I want to do, and that can help you build your self-confidence so that you don't have sort of that internal voice saying, I can't do this. So yeah, as much as you can practice would be great.
We need to keep track of time as well.
How are we doing?
We got 9:52.
My wife is a professional author, and watching her career, a couple things that I saw is, number one is, if you're submitting something someplace and they have writer's guidelines, get them, read them, follow them. That's the fastest way of getting your stuff rejected is by just not following the guidelines, because they will tell you in those what they want. And then from, you know, working with Carl's, we've been putting out Terra stuff. Deadlines are critical. My wife, early on in the very beginning, she was doing work contract for hire, and one of the other writers in some of the stuff they did kind of fell down, didn't make it. She got contacted and said, we've got this deadline, and it was only a few weeks out. She said, can we make that? And it's like, yeah. She made the deadline, and she got additional work because of that.
Deadlines are amazing.
Yes.
Making deadlines,
editors are like, under pressure under the timeline. And so I would say just what I learned from her on that is, you know, if you want to get into the writing and get into the industry, one, you have to be professional. So one, make your deadlines, and two, follow the writer's guidelines if they're available.
Yeah, my biggest pet peeve is people who just disappear. You know, you got them working on something and there's no email contact forever. You don't have a phone number for them, so it's like, if you have an issue, please tell somebody that, you know, there's a, you know, because, hey, you know, my sister's house burned down last week, you know, that could happen to somebody, you know, but they still should have public access to internet to let you know, hey, my house burned down, my computer went up with it, so.
Should we do parting thoughts, maybe?
Yeah, party thoughts, but yeah, if you're going to get a good writer, communicate. That's one of the key things. Yeah, parting thoughts, go for it.
Oh, I was just going to add to that to say that can be one of the biggest things that can help you promote yourself and also help you to continue to get good, solid, reliable work, is that hit your deadlines. Don't say, oh, maybe it's a guideline that I get it in by Monday. You know, you get it into them by Monday or early. And I know that helped me when I was getting started early on, is that I turned stuff in early. It was done. It was polished, you know. I'm sure there were probably tons of things that maybe they needed to work with, but be communicative and always sort of take that first step, you know, go up and talk to the editor or send the email. If you don't hear from them for a while, send another email. And that can really show them that, hey, you are serious about this, that you're not just somebody who wanted to do it on a whim. And I think people appreciate that.
They do. And I wanted to say one of the best opportunities you guys have to write for Pathfinder and get noticed would probably be Wayfinder. You know, because you can learn as you go. They have, you know, more time and willing to work with new writers. And they're definitely looking for new writers, so try your feet there first.
Is a really big advantage. Like, just if you see people that you recognize, you know their names, just go up and talk and say, hey, I'd love to be a writer. Like, can you give me any tips, or can I contact you later?
Yeah, and as one guy said, another panel, feel free to buy people drinks. And he said that was the key to getting in. Was that Ryan? Ryan, if you ever see Ryan Macklin, offer him a drink and he'll talk to you forever.
Has anyone here read the essay that was making the rounds on the internet a while back? And I forget the name of the author, but she wrote about, the opening was all about how stories about llamas are always the same. Does that ring a bell? Yeah. Okay. It's wonderful, and if you should just Google like cannibalistic llama writer and you'll find it. But she started by writing all the stories about llamas are the same. You hear it over and over how, you know, their scaly hides, their red eyes, how they eat their young, and how they charge lemming-like off of cliffs every now and then and fall crashing into the sea. And you're kind of reading and going, what? and her overall point in the essay was that if we hear the same stories over and over again, then when we meet a real llama in life and they are not like those stories, we would rather go back to the stories because they're familiar than accept what we see in front of us as reality. And I think that for new writers coming into the industry, if you want to communicate your unique perspective, if you want to show what it's like for you as a female gamer and try to put that into your work, you know, get comfortable, But don't let what stories already exist kind of try to shape what you're writing now. Look at what, I remember, this is very random, but I remember a dungeon adventure many years ago that had a female lumberjack in it as an NPC, and this guy wrote in and was really angry about having a female lumberjack. He's like, that's not realistic, which is my favorite argument against fantasy anything. Gosh, female lumberjacks, that completely broke the verisimilitude of the world. And then I got really mad, and I actually like wrote this lumberjack company. Like, do you have lumberjacks? And they were like, a few. As like some kind of defense for this like, I don't even know, Forgotten Realms world that had a female lumberjack in it. But yeah, like, the more we can break those kind of expectations, the easier it is to accept all the different creative things that we want to do in our games. And so that would be like my parting advice is find a way to get into writing, get comfortable with what you're doing, and then go for what you feel like you want to communicate regardless of how well represented it is in existing game stuff.
Yes. First step, though, is be courageous.
Yes.
And don't give up.
Exactly.
And don't give up.
Persistence, courage, and butt in chair.
Are we out of time?
Yeah, we're out of time. Lisa and them are taking over. So.
Thank you so much.
No Directions PaizoCon 2013 coverage was made possible by the KD PaizoCon 2013 Con team, including Mitchell Anderson, Sarah Bull, Darren Kaldemeyer, Venus Decoy, Robin Nixon, and Justin Sluter. Huge thanks to them for all their help. If you like this special, check out 35privatesanctuary.com for more recordings from this and previous year's PaizoCon. Check out the No Direction YouTube channel for seminar videos. And don't forget to visit our sponsor at chimeragames.ca.